Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
So today we're really diving into one specific source. It's a YouTube video, actually, offering some pretty blunt, honest thoughts on liquid glass.
Ah, yes, that one caused a bit of a stir.
It did. And our mission, really, for this deep dive is to unpack what that video shares about this new UI feature. We want to explore that tension it highlights.
The gap between the tech and the usefulness.
Exactly. How technically impressive it might be versus its actual practical value. Is it real innovation or, maybe something else?
Smoke and mirrors, perhaps? Or just change for change's sake?
Could be. We'll look at what the source found impressive, what worries it raised, and maybe what it tells us about how tech evolves. Or sometimes seems to just kind of spin its wheels, right? Trying to meet user desires or market pressure.
Right. And jumping into the source, you definitely get that initial reaction of, wow, okay, technically this is something.
It gives credit where it's due first.
Absolutely. It fully acknowledges, look, liquid glass is technically impressive. Forget the old, Windows Vista arrow memes.
Right.
The source makes it really clear that getting light refraction right in software, making pixels look like light, bending through real glass, that's seriously complex.
Yeah.
Hard to pull off accurately.
Yeah, I remember that part. And didn't the source mention Apple actually commissioning, literal glass pieces?
Yeah.
Physical objects?
Yes. Shaped like UI elements. The idea being to give the software team something physical, something tangible to reference, to make the software feel less flat, more real.
That's pretty wild.
The source calls it fascinating and very technically impressive.
Yeah.
And from a pure engineering standpoint, making light behave that way on screen, yeah, it's a feat, no question.
Okay, so the technical chops are there. It's clever, it's difficult, but, and this is the big but in the source.
This is where it pivots hard. Despite all that cool tech, the core argument from this source is that liquid glass feels like a solution looking for a problem.
A solution looking for a problem. Yeah, you hear that phrase and you immediately think, okay, nice, but do we need it? So if it's not solving a clear problem, why build it? Who's it for? What's the theory there?
Well, the theory laid out is that it's mainly for a pretty specific group. The source calls them a very, very vocal minority.
Ah, the loud ones.
The ones who've been asking, apparently quite loudly, for a massive visual change. Something like an iOS 7-worthy redesign. A total refresh.
The people who get bored of their phone every year and want a new paint job, basically, looking for that novelty hit.
That's the angle presented. Users who are bored with their phone and want the UI itself to be a source of entertainment. It's not driven by function, like this is hard to use. It's just wanting change for its own sake.
And you can kind of see with social media and tech hype cycles, how companies might feel they have to respond to those voices, even if they aren't the majority. But the source draws a sharp contrast, right, between that desire for entertainment and how most people actually use their phones.
Oh, absolutely. The analysis zooms out and says, look, most people buying iPhones aren't chasing the next visual thrill. They buy them for utility.
Like a tool.
Exactly. The source uses the analogy of buying a washing machine or a refrigerator. You get it because it does essential jobs reliably.
Navigation, mobile payments, boarding passes, work stuff, keeping in touch, email. It's just woven into daily life for so many.
Yeah, it's not a toy for most people.
It's how you function.
Right. Smartphones are not optional anymore for tons of people, even those who might say they hate smartphones. They're essential tools. And that's where tweaking the interface just for looks gets risky, according to the source. It messes with the tool.
Which brings us back to that fridge analogy the source used. That really landed.
Yeah, it's like you open your fridge expecting milk on the top shelf where it always is, and suddenly everything's rearranged, the shelves are different, the packaging's changed.
And you're just standing there confused trying to find the butter.
Yeah, exactly. It's confusing, it's frustrating, and it feels totally pointless because, like the source says, nothing was wrong before. It shatters that familiarity, that muscle memory you rely on for a tool you use constantly.
Okay, so technically amazing, maybe for a niche group wanting novelty, but potentially disruptive for the average user who just wants their phone to work predictably. Let's get specific. What does liquid glass actually do visually And what are the reactions?
Sure. So the source describes the effects getting light to refract, those shiny specular highlights making things look glossy. And it has this dynamic nature.
Meaning things animate more.
Yeah, things sort of flow or expand from where you touch.
Hmm.
Alerts might bloom outwards from your tap. Context menus unfurl smoothly instead of just appearing. It's all very glassy, fluid, animated.
And the reaction, all positive.
Definitely not universal. The source points to a clear split. In the tech community, you hear more positive stuff. Wow, it's so different, unique, fresh, and modern and clean. They kind of dig the novelty and the tech behind it.
Okay, the enthusiasts like it. What about, regular folks, people outside that tech world?
That's where the source says the feedback is way more negative. Lots of complaints about readability.
Like literally hard to read the screen.
Yeah, concerns that text gets blurred in with the background, specific issues like not enough background blur in Control Center, making the controls underneath distracting, and just generally people finding it overstimulating.
Too much going on visually.
Exactly. Hard to look at, especially with multiple moving glassy things on screen. It really makes you ask, does this visual flair actually help you use the phone, or does it get in the way?
Seems like making everything super visually active could just make it noisy and harder to focus on the task. And the source mentioned people losing track of their apps.
Yeah, that loss of familiarity again. The observation was that with the changes, it feels like no one remembers where their apps are. Even small visual tweaks break that ingrained muscle memory, and for some, the whole thing just feels pointless.
Because it doesn't help them do anything better.
Yeah. Right. It just looks different, maybe even makes things harder to find.
And there was that point about how the effect doesn't really work well on smaller elements.
Yeah, the source noted that the smaller the icon or button like on macOS, the less you can even see the liquid glass effect. Which is kind of funny given how much Apple promotes it visually on their websites. All that effort, and sometimes you can barely tell it's there.
Which leads to this other, maybe more cynical, take the source offers. If it's technically hard, practically iffy, and getting mixed reviews, why prioritize it? The source suggests it might be a distraction.
That's a big part of the analysis, yeah. The source speculates it's very likely meant to be a distraction.
A distraction from what?
From what the source identifies as the big disappointment with Apple right now, the perception around their AI capabilities.
The whole Apple Intelligence thing, and whether it really measures up to what competitors are doing?
Yeah, precisely. The theory is liquid glass was rolled out just meant to get people talking about something outside of AI. A way to successfully get people off of the Siri train, stop them focusing on AI limits. And maybe, for a while, it worked. It replaced the Apple Intelligence headlines.
So a shiny object to divert attention. It plays into that theme of maybe stagnation in core areas being papered over with visual gloss.
That's the argument presented. A potentially shallow innovation, visually impressive, but maybe designed to shift focus from where deeper functional progress is lagging or less spectacular.
And this distraction, if that's what it is, has a real cost, right?
Yeah.
The source really digs into that.
Oh yeah, it's not just talk, it's about resources. The source emphasizes that people spent their lives hours doing this. Talented engineers, designers pouring time into these visual details. And the company spent money to design this. It's precious and expensive software engineer resources and time.
All those meetings, the debates about contrast, blur, drop shadows, just getting those reflections right so they're visible but not too distracting.
Exactly. And the critique is, all that time and money on visuals might be time and money not spent elsewhere, like on actual functional features people need, or bug fixes and patches, or just making the OS more reliable.
The source even mentioned their own experience.
Yeah, shared a personal frustration that the iOS 18 public release felt not that stable, implying maybe those resources could have been better allocated to core stability instead of visual effects.
Which really brings us to the core question the source poses. Was it worth it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Was it worth pouring all those design resources and making these software decisions, using up all that high-level engineering talent just because they want it to look different? For what the source kind of dismissively calls pretty shiny reflections.
When the alternative, suggested by the source, could have been a stability year.
Exactly. A year focused not on flashy new looks, but on refining what's there, making the OS actually reliable and consistent, fixing bugs, maybe delivering properly on features promised earlier. It just throws that tension into sharp relief. Visual excitement versus rock-solid function. That sense of stagnation and reliability for the sake of looks.
And the source predicts an outcome that's kind of ironic, circling back to the solution looking for a problem idea.
They do. The prediction is that it's highly likely Apple will end up adding accessibility options. Why? To let users dial down or turn off the effects.
Options to reduce the reflectiveness and transparency, essentially an off switch for liquid glass.
Pretty much. Letting people turn off liquid glass to make the interface feel familiar, less complex again.
So, spend huge resources creating this complex visual feature,
Uh-huh.
only to then spend more resources creating a way for people to disable it and go back to something like how it was before.
It definitely raises questions about resource allocation, yeah. Is that the best use of top-tier talent when maybe users just want their phone to be reliable and predictable?
And just to touch on one final point, from the source they did contrast liquid glass with one functional change that did happen, but with a sort of humorous sigh about how long it took.
Ah, yeah, the macOS volume indicator. The source pointed out, with clear exasperation, that Apple finally moved it after, like, decades of it being annoying.
Took long enough.
Right, and the source uses that to contrast a needed functional fix something that actually makes the tool better with the cosmetic stuff like liquid glass. Noting, Riley, it only took you 40 years. It's a small thing, but it highlights that difference in priorities. The shiny new visual versus fixing long-standing usability problems. Innovation versus actual improvement.
It really does.
Yeah.
So stepping back and looking at this whole analysis in the source, you see the stark contrast. Technical skill versus user experience, catering to that desire for constant visual change versus the need for reliable, predictable tools.
Yeah, it really pushes us to think about priorities. Okay, our tech is mature in many ways. Phones connect, navigate, compute incredibly well. So, is purely cosmetic innovation like this a good step? Is it just a distraction? Or is it maybe a costly detour, using up resources that could go towards stability, fixing bugs, or adding genuinely useful new functions that make the tool work better, not just look fancier?
What does this deep dive into liquid glass through the lens of this particular source suggest to you about where interface design is headed and maybe what we should be prioritizing in our tech? What kind of innovation truly matters? Definitely something to chew on.